Hello everyone, I am Pradeep. Welcome to the series where we are taking a bit closer look into the implementation of entities. In this video, we will take a look for a simple entity. We will just implement this entity at its simpler level. So let's go to the code. I am actually building this as a travel module, as I explained in my intro video about the transport example. So we are building a travel module, just a simple travel info with the name description. It is packaged into custom entities using core 7 and we this is dependent on a controller file. Let's go into the install file. In the install file in hook schema, we have defined our table, which is the travel table. It has 4 fields. TID is the primary ID. Transport, source from, and destination to are the other fields which it have. Now let's move on to the module file. In module file, we have defined the hook permissions. We have 2 items for it. One is for permission for viewing the content, another one is for administrating the content, and we will use them at their wherever they are needed. In travel entity info, this is the hook entity info, which is the vital one, which tells the system that this module is implementing adding an entity to the system. The entity name is the machine name is travel. The name, which is the label for the entity, is this label field represents the title. The base table which the entity is using is travel. Entity keys are important, like these are the name of the keys for the entity. So this one contains the name of the keys for the entity. The ID is the TID, which is the primary key in the table, and label is transport. I will come back to this. Actually, this is optional, but I have defined it for a purpose. I will come back to this when we go to the flow for this. We have a controller class for travel controller. I will also come back to this. Metadata controller class is for the metadata wrappers, and URI callback, we are using the travel URI is one of the function. I will also come back to this one. This is when this is actually used. Now coming to the other function, which is travel load. Actually, this is this is hook underscore load, and this is invoked during loading the entity, like entity load, where classes Drupal default entity controller. The information, like it will just this is loading the entity. The information can either can be read from the database or the entity cache. Entity cache is one of the item which should have been added here, but we are not using it. So as we are not using entity cache, so in this case, on every entity load, which is travel load, it will read the data from the database. So and eventually travel hook load eventually calls hook load multiple for if there are entities to be loaded which are more than one. So this is the travel load multiple, which takes the multiple IDs and returns back the entities. And next one is hook entity property info. This function tells the system about the properties of the entity. Our entity has the properties of TID, transport, source from, and destination to. So it tells the system about that the travel entity has these 4 properties. Okay, next is the menu hook. Actually, we have used the base URI, which is travel and wildcard, and the position of the argument where we commonly receiving the place from. First one is the travel path, and travel path is contains the only a list of travels, means list of entity travels, which is defined in page callback travel list, which is defined in pages INC. So let's go there and see what is defined there in pages INC. In travel list, it is Drupal set title. It's just setting the title, and we are theming an output. What is the output? We are just adding a path like travel had. Just so in the link to have a link for adding a travel. And entity load, this is what I was referring to. So we are loading the entities, like the what is the type of entity to be loaded is travel. So we are loading, means this is the all the entities for travel are loaded in entities, and this is looped and looped, and each of the entity URI each now this entity URI this is what now this entity URI will call the our travel URI. Now this entity URI will call the it will search in the entity info, it will search what is the entity URI defined, and here we have assigned with travel URI. Now in the travel URI we are just returning the path of travel with travel ID. This travel is the entity which was collected from travel load. So this is what it will be collecting, and it will be and this entity URI path is used here while building another link which is simply an entity label with path. And what is in entity label? Now when entity label is called, it will, this is the function in entity, it will search if there is any entity label callback which is defined in the module. We don't have any callback defined, so it will see if any label is there. So if the label is there, and what is the label? It is defined value as transport, and this transport is the name of the field of the table from which the value they have to collect, the entity has to collect. So whatever the value was stored in transport field, it will collect it and it will display it. One other thing is that if that the label, if the label callback is, if we have defined the entity label callback, which and the default is something like entity label class, I think, entity label class label. So if this is defined, and suppose so this is the default callback which is in the entity entity which is defined in entity, but it will also search for label. So anyway, if we are defining this or not defining this with the custom callback, it will look for a label. So that way it makes us important to define this label in this entity info which I was mentioning earlier. So this is the that is the output which will be displayed. So let's watch that in the, let's see that in the browser. Okay, so let's just type travel. So as we till now, as we didn't have created any content, so that's why it is not defined in, like there is nothing in the list. So let's now add a travel. So add new travel is the link which is there in the travel list in the top section. So now on clicking that link, add travel ad, it presented us with this form. Let's see how it happened, how it came up. So let's go to the menu for travel ad. In the menu section, travel ad, yeah, which is this one. Travel ad has a callback of travel ad, and travel and which is defined in here itself. Now travel ad, it sets the simple thing, Drupal set title, it is very common. Now entity create, this is important. Entity create is a function which initializes an entity. It just initializes an entity for the travel type, means because our entity is travel type, so it will initialize an entity for travel. This array is blank. Generally we need this for bundles, which we discuss in the next videos. So it just now this entity create will just initialize the entity, and Drupal get form and we are calling Drupal get form with a function travel ad form and passing this entity as an argument. And in travel ad form we are saving this entity in form state travel. This wrapper I will come back in the edit section. And in the travel ad form, it is basic like as any other Drupal form. We are just putting some fields for transport, source from, and destination, which are the fields for entity, properties for entity. So that's, and with some actions for submit actions. So that way that's how the form appeared there. Now let's put some content and save that form. Okay, transport, explore the north, source from King's Landing to Winterfell. So let's save it. So it got saved. Now this entity view, it is something. Now this is what this travel one is. The let's go to the menu, travel and wildcard, which is this one. This one, travel, and this is defined here, and it has an travel view which is defined pages INC. Let's see what's happening there. In travel view, we are calling entity view, which is again an entity function. And entity view, it will display the properties of the entity through theme. But one important thing is that as I told that we are using a controller, travel controller, and I will display it, means I will show you. Now this, we are using this travel controller and extending it by entity API controller, which is the default controller for API. Now we are using this to override this build content, because we have some different fields for transport source from a destination which the default entity is not aware of. So that's why to to render these fields to in the display output, we need to override this function. So that's why we have used the travel controller. So that's why the view is also appearing there, and this view is also with the edit link also. So when I am editing the link, so it is giving me the form with the values which were saved. Now see what's in the menu for this. In travel one, edit. Now this one. Again, this is just a page callback of Drupal get form, and the page arguments of Drupal add form with the base URI argument position, which is 1 in all cases. This is 1, and it will same way it will load the entity and will give the entity to travel add form. Now this one, travel add form, the same way it will because it has already it will load the entity as we have passed in the argument in the first position, which is the TID of the entity. So it will while the entity create this time, what it will do is that it will this will directly pass to the travel add form. So the entity load will load the entity with the TID and will store in the form state. And this wrapper is important. It will collect the values which are saved for this transport entity, like travel entity, and it will show in the default value. So that's why we are able to see the values in the form field. And one other thing is that if that entity is not new, we will also show the delete action for this. And the submit actions and the confirm submit action for delete are very common, which we use in normally in other Drupal forms. So let's do some let's update that entity. Go with Uncle Benjamin from Castle Rock. Castle Rock to the wall. Save it. Now it got saved. We can also, it's asking about delete, cancel, delete, delete. So it is got deleted. So in the delete submit action, one thing is that we are getting the wrapper for the entity information from this one, entity metadata wrapper, which entity is passed from the collected from the form state, and we are just deleting this. So this is all about very simple at entity at its very simple level. Obviously the purpose of entity is way much more beyond this. So as for a start, I just took this as an example, and in the next video we will see how we can add bundles to it, and from there we will go and add each one and more another steps, and we will increase the learning level of entity to one step at a time. So this was all from my side. Let's meet in the next video where we will see how to add bundles to an entity. Thanks.